She didn't know the man who ruined her life would be the same man willing to burn the world down to save it. He deported her, erased her, replaced her with a woman who wore diamonds and spoke in whispers. But 9 months later, 3 heartbeats changed the entire equation, and the secret his own mother buried in silence? It didn't stay buried. It never does. Not when love is this violent. Not when the truth has legs. If you've ever been discarded by someone who should have chosen you, stay. Because justice in this story doesn't arrive quietly. Welcome, besties. You found the one channel where Afro-Korean love doesn't ask for permission. It takes what it's owed. Hit that subscribe button before this story grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. Because once it starts, there is no pausing. The night Zara Mensah walked into the wrong building was the night Yeon Tae-sang's perfectly constructed world cracked straight down the middle. Seoul was cold the way it always was in November. A cold that didn't ask, just entered. Zara had been in South Korea for exactly 43 days, working as a legal interpreter for the Ghana-Korea Trade Commission, living in a rented studio in Mapo-gu that smelled like instant ramen and someone else's old dreams. She had a plan. She always had a plan. Returned to Accra in 6 months with enough saved to pay for her mother's hip replacement and her younger brother Kofi's second year at university. Clean. Practical. No détour. But plans have a habit of combusting in the presence of the wrong man. The building she entered was sleek, black glass, 40 floors of controlled silence in Gangnam. She was supposed to be at the Ministry Building 3 blocks east. A wrong turn, a dead phone, and the kind of stubborn refusal to ask for help that had defined Zara Mensah since childhood landed her in the marble lobby of Yeon Group's headquarters at 9:47 on a Wednesday evening. The lobby was nearly empty. A security guard at the far desk. Indirect lighting that made everything look like a scene from a film that hadn't decided its genre yet. Zara was already pulling out her phone charger, scanning for an outlet, muttering to herself in a mixture of Twi and English, completely unbothered by the grandness of the space, when the elevator opened and Yeon Tae-sang walked out. He was not what she expected a man like him to look like. She didn't know who he was yet. She would learn. But in that first unguarded moment, before context arrived to ruin everything, she registered him the way you register thunder before the storm makes sense. A full-body awareness, immediate and unreasonable. Tall for a Korean man. Broad. A charcoal suit that had been tailored for his exact body and no other. Dark hair pushed back from a face that looked like it had been drawn by someone who understood both beauty and menace. His jaw was tight. His eyes, when they found her, were the color of deep water at night. He stopped walking. That was the thing no one ever mentioned about Yeon Tae-sang. He was not a man who stopped. Meetings waited for him. Flights delayed themselves on his instruction. 4 floors of his building had once gone dark for 18 hours because he'd said so in passing. He did not stop for inconveniences. But he stopped for her. Zara barely noticed. She'd found an outlet behind a decorative pillar and was crouched down, plugging in her phone, still muttering. Her braids had come half loose from their bun. Her coat was a warm orange wool that had no business looking as good on her as it did. She was completely at ease in a space that made grown men anxious, simply because she had no idea whose space it was. "This building is closed," he said. His Korean was low and precise. Zara looked up, switched immediately to Korean, fluent, slightly accented, unbothered. "I know, I'm just charging my phone, 5 minutes." The security guard had already started crossing the lobby. Tae-sang raised one hand, a subtle movement, and the man stopped mid-stride. "You walked in here to charge your phone. I walked in here because I made a wrong turn and my phone died, and I needed to find the Ministry Building. Do you know where it is?" He looked at her for a long moment. Something was happening in his expression. Not softness, nothing as simple as that. It was more like disturbance. Like still water after something falls into it. 3 blocks east, he said. "Thank you." She looked back at her phone. 1%. She exhaled. 2 more minutes. He should have walked away. He had a car waiting. He had 3 missed calls from his chief of operations and 1 from a man in Busan who didn't leave messages if things were going well. He had a world that required constant tending or it turned feral. He stood there for 2 more minutes and watched a stranger charge her phone in his lobby, completely unbothered by him, and felt something in his chest do something it had not done in years. He didn't have a name for it yet. He would later. He would hate that he did. She unplugged her phone at 2%, straightened up, smoothed her coat, and looked at him one last time. Thanks for the outlet, she said in English this time, like an afterthought. Then she walked out into the cold Seoul night. Tae-sang stood in the lobby until her orange coat disappeared through the glass doors. Sir, his driver said from the entrance. Your 9 o'clock, reschedule it. He found out her name by the next morning. This was not difficult. He had people whose job it was to find things. Her interpreter badge had registered on the lobby's security feed. Zara Mensah, Ghana Trade Commission, Mapogu District residence. 26 years old. Linguistics degree from University of Ghana. Top of her intake. No criminal record. No ties to any of the families or factions that operated in Seoul's underworld. Completely, impossibly clean. Tae-sang read the file once, set it down, and told himself he was being irrational. Then he read it again. By the following week he had, without exactly meaning to, crossed paths with her 3 more times. Once at the ministry building, he had a meeting there genuinely, where he saw her through a glass partition, translating for a trade panel with a calm authority that made the Ghanaian delegates visibly relax. Once at a pajangmatcha in Mapo where he had no business being, eating titiak baki at a plastic table like a man who had not eaten at a Michelin-starred restaurant every day for the last decade. And once on the Han River path where she was walking fast against the wind with her braids flying and her face turned up like she was having an argument with the sky. He didn't approach her that 3rd time. He sat in the back of his car on the bridge above and watched her walk until she turned a corner. His head of security, a sharp and quietly loyal man named Oh Sung-yi, said nothing for a long time. Then, should I prepare anything? No, Tae-sang said. Then find out what she likes. Zara did not notice the coffee that appeared on her desk at the commission on Thursday morning. She assumed it was from the catering staff. She did not connect the upgraded hotel room she was moved into Friday evening to anything other than an administrative correction. And when the dry cleaners lost her favorite coat and it was returned the next day, cleaned and with a small tear in the lining repaired, she assumed it was a lucky coincidence. She was brilliant in many ways. She was not looking for a man in Seoul, so she did not see one finding her. The first time they met again, properly, was at a state reception at the Shilla Hotel, 3 weeks after the lobby incident. Zara was there as a delegate interpreter. Tae-sang was there because his family name opened every door in the country and his presence was technically optional but practically mandatory. She saw him across the room and felt the recognition a second before she placed it. The lobby, the charcoal suit. The hand that had stopped the security guard mid-stride with a gesture so small it should not have carried that much authority. She turned back to her conversation. He was beside her 17 minutes later. She knew because she had, against every professional instinct, been counting. You found the ministry building, he said. 3 blocks east, she confirmed. Very accurate directions. I'm Yeon Tae-sang. She extended her hand. Zara Mensah. She watched his face for the flicker most people showed when they heard an African name in a Korean space. The slight recalibration, the subtle shift in register. There was nothing. He shook her hand like she was simply a person, which she was, and which more people should have managed. You speak Korean well, he said. I speak it correctly, she said. Well implies I'm surprising you. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. More like the ghost of one, caught before it could embarrass him. You're not, he said simply. They talked for 22 minutes. She knew because a colleague came to find her and told her the panel was resuming. In 22 minutes, she learned he ran a conglomerate, was unmarried, ate tteokbokki from street stalls when his schedule allowed, and read physical books in a world of screens. In 22 minutes, he learned she intended to be in Seoul for 5 more months, found Korean bureaucracy both impressive and maddening, and had no patience for men who assumed that fluency in their language was a performance put on for their benefit. When she left, he watched her go. He called Oh Sung-yi that night. Clear my schedule for the 3rd week of December. Sung-yi, who had known Tae-sang for 11 years and had never once heard him clear a week voluntarily, said nothing for 3 seconds. Then, understood, sir. The 3rd encounter was her fault, or so she told herself later. She had been warned, mildly, by a colleague at the commission, a Korean-American woman named Park Soo-yeon who had been in Seoul long enough to know the architecture of its power. Yeon Tae-sang, Soo-yeon had said, almost offhandedly, when Zara mentioned the name. His family controls 3 of the largest shipping lines in East Asia. There are also persistent rumors. She paused. Very persistent. What kind of rumors? Soo-yeon stirred her coffee. The kind that explain why no one ever files complaints. Zara had filed that information under caution and moved on. She was practical. She wasn't looking for a man. She definitely wasn't looking for a dangerous one. But the fourth week of November brought a problem that had nothing to do with looking. A man named Director Kwon at the commission had been quietly altering interpretation records. Not dramatically, subtly. The kind of small distortions that accumulate into major trade discrepancies. Zara had noticed the pattern after her second week. She documented it. She brought it to her supervisor, a mild and cautious man who suggested she might be misreading things. She was not misreading things. When she brought the documentation to him a second time, she found her work schedule had been quietly cut. Access to 3 databases she needed, revoked. And in the hallway, 2 of Kwon's associates had let her walk past them while exchanging a look she recognized from home, the look men give women they've decided to make small. She was not going to be made small. That evening, frustrated and thinking through her next move, she ended up, through a chain of contacts and a recommendation she hadn't fully investigated, at a private dinner organized by a trade law firm that happened to also work closely with the Yeon Group. Tae-sang was there. He saw her the moment she entered. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress, her braids pinned up, gold at her ears and throat. She was carrying a folder. She looked like a woman who had come to work, not to impress, and somehow this made her more striking than anything deliberate could have. He stood up. Several people noticed. Yeon Tae-sang did not stand up for people. They stood for him. Zara spent the dinner on the opposite side of the room, networking with intentional efficiency, collecting names and numbers that might be useful in her Kwon situation. She was aware of Tae-sang the way you are aware of a fire in the room. Without looking directly at it, you know its exact location and approximate heat. He came to her at the end of the evening when the room had thinned. "You're troubled," he said. "I'm working," she said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." He looked at the folder she was still holding. "What's in there?" She considered him. This was a man with resources. This was also a man with rumors attached to his name that no one would document. The fact that he made her pulse do something irregular was a reason to be careful, not a reason to trust him. "A problem," she said. "What kind?" "The kind where someone in a position of authority is manipulating records and making life difficult for anyone who notices." His eyes sharpened. "Name. I don't need you to solve it. I didn't offer to." His tone was even. "I asked for a name." She studied him. He was standing very close. Not inappropriately, but deliberately. Like he'd calculated the precise distance that communicated intention without pressure. It was disarming, and she suspected he knew it. She told him about Kwon. Not everything. Enough. By the following Monday, Director Kwon had been called before an internal audit board that had materialized, as far as Zara could tell, entirely from nothing. By Wednesday, her database access was restored. By Friday, Kwon had submitted a voluntary resignation that was accepted with unusual efficiency. Soo-yeon leaned over her desk that Friday afternoon and said, very quietly, "What exactly happened?" Zara looked at her coffee. It was very good coffee. It had appeared on her desk, as it sometimes did, without any clear origin. "I have no idea," she said. She was lying. She was also against every sensible instinct she possessed, smiling. He asked her to dinner for the first time at the end of November, via a handwritten note delivered to the commission by a man in a black car. The note was brief. A restaurant name, a date, a time. And then, in smaller script below, "You can say no. I won't make it difficult." Why die to the acknowledgement that she had a choice, stated so plainly, without performance, was what did it. Men with power rarely remembered that other people had options. The fact that he did registered somewhere deep in her chest, she said yes. The restaurant was in Buckshon, small and extraordinarily quiet, the kind of place that didn't take reservations except for people it already knew. Tae-sang was already there when she arrived, standing rather than seated, which struck her. A small point of courtesy that meant he'd been waiting rather than letting her walk in to find him comfortable. The dinner lasted 3 hours. She learned that his father had died when he was 19, that he had taken control of the company at 22, and that he had spent the decades since building it into something that would have made his father afraid of him. He said this without self-pity or pride, just the measured delivery of a man who had made peace with a complicated truth. She told him about Accra. About her mother, Abina, who ran a seamstress business from the front room of their house and had never once, in Zara's entire life, complained about anything. About Kofi, who wanted to be an engineer and had the grades to get there if the money could be found. About the specific guilt of being talented in a world that didn't distribute talent's rewards fairly. Taesang listened the way powerful people rarely listened, without formulating his response while she spoke, without redirecting to himself, without the particular variety of mansplaining that dressed itself up as engagement. When she finished, he said, "Your mother sounds like someone who never got the version of the world she deserved." The simplicity of it caught her off guard. She blinked. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Yeah, she is." He refilled her glass without being asked. They left the restaurant at midnight. He walked her to her car. She'd taken a taxi, but he'd arranged a car without announcing it, and it appeared with such natural timing that she almost didn't notice. At the door, he stood at the same precise distance he always maintained, not closing it unless she did. "Thank you," she said, "for dinner, and for what you didn't directly do about Kwon." He looked at her steadily. "I have no idea what you're referring to." "Of course not." The ghost of the almost smile again. She was beginning to want to see the real one badly enough to worry about it. She got in the car. He stood on the pavement and watched it pull away. December arrived, and with it a complication Zara had not planned for. The fact that she was thinking about Yeon Taesang at moments that had nothing to do with him. During interpretation sessions. While eating breakfast. At 3 a.m. when Seoul was quiet and she was staring at the ceiling of her upgraded hotel room. They had dinner twice more. Once at his suggestion, once at hers, which surprised them both, she thought. He was consistent in a way she hadn't anticipated. The notes, always handwritten. The coffee on her desk, which she now knew came from him and pretended not to. The way he gave her his undivided attention like it was the most natural thing and the most deliberate thing simultaneously. But she kept Soo-yeon's words like a stone in her coat pocket. Very persistent rumors. The kind that explain why no one ever files complaints. The stone was still there the evening she arrived at a law conference where Taesang also happened to be, and found him in a corridor conversation with a woman named Jae Soo-yoon, late 30s, severe and polished, a family law attorney who moved through rooms like she owned them. There was a familiarity between them that Zara's body registered before her brain caught up. She walked past. He saw her. 20 minutes later, he was beside her. "You arrived," he said. "I have a panel," she said, her voice perfectly measured. "Zara." He said her name with a weight that made the room feel smaller. "Soo Ha-yoon is my cousin's wife. She handles my legal retainers." Zara turned to look at him. He met her eyes directly, without deflection. "I'm not explaining myself," he said. "I'm giving you information. What you do with it is yours." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the panel room door. "Your cousin is lucky," she said. She felt him almost smile behind her as she walked away. The night everything changed came without warning, the way the most important nights always do. It was the second week of December, after a commission gala. Zara was in the back of the car he'd arranged. She had stopped protesting the cars, reviewing notes on her phone, tired in the good way that comes from work done well. The car stopped. Not at her hotel. At a junction in Seoko-gu, where 2 vehicles had blocked the road and 3 men in unmarked clothing were speaking to her driver through the window. Zara had grown up understanding danger's texture. She knew the difference between inconvenience and threat. Her body understood the latter now, fast and cold. She reached for her phone. No signal. This was not a coincidence. The door opened. She was efficient about it. She had pepper spray in her clutch, and she'd trained in self-defense because her mother had raised her with the understanding that beauty was not armor. She got one man's eyes. She fought with the concentrated chaos of someone who had no intention of being taken anywhere. But there were 3 of them, and the clutch was in her hand, not her pocket, and the black car arrived with a screech that rewrote the silence. Oh Sung-yi emerged first, and then from the passenger door, moving with a controlled fury that made the air around him seem different, colder, more compressed, was Yeon Taesang. He had been in a board meeting. He was still in his suit. He had come from wherever he was to hear, and the speed of that, the immediacy, told Zara something before any words were spoken. The 3 men looked at him. Something passed over their faces, the specific expression of people who have made a very expensive miscalculation. "Leave," Taesang said. "One word. No theater." They left. He crossed the space between them and stood before her, scanning her face, her arms, her hands, methodical, rapid, thorough. "Are you hurt?" "No." Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. She was looking at him with the stone she'd been carrying finally, quietly dropping. Because whatever Yeon Taesang was, whatever rumors attached to his name, he had come here, immediately, in the middle of a board meeting. And the look on his face was not the look of a man executing a strategy. It was something rawer than that. Something that frightened her a little more than the men she'd just fought off, because it would be much harder to pepper spray. "Who sent them?" she asked. His jaw was tight. Kwon had partners. She processed this. This was about me surfacing the record manipulation. The partners are larger than Kwon. I should have moved faster. Something crossed his face. Guilt, she realized. Clean and uncomplicated. "I'm sorry." Zara Mensah had not, in 26 years, heard a powerful man apologize to her without threading it with qualification. The simplicity of it landed somewhere she wasn't prepared for. "I don't need," she started. "I know what you need," he said quietly. "You need to know you're safe. You are. I'm making sure of it." He paused. "Will you let me?" The Seoul night was cold around them. The cars were gone. Sung-gi stood at a respectful distance, attending to something on his phone with the practiced invisibility of a man who understood when to disappear within visible range. "Yes," she said finally. He exhaled, just slightly, like he'd been holding something he hadn't known he was holding. He moved her into a secure apartment in Gangnam that evening. Her protest was mild and primarily performative, which she admitted to herself in the elevator. The apartment was on the 31st floor. It had floor-to-ceiling windows and a kitchen stocked with West African ingredients she had not once mentioned missing, but apparently he'd found out about through means she preferred not to examine. She stood in the kitchen and stared at the agushi and the plantains and the dawa-dawa paste and felt something behind her eyes get dangerously warm. He was standing in the doorway. "If anything is wrong, everything is wrong," she said, "and nothing is wrong, both simultaneously." He crossed to stand beside her at the counter. They looked at the groceries together for a moment. "My mother makes stew on Sundays," Zara said. "She uses too much pepper and it's still the best thing I've ever eaten. Tell me how she makes it," he said. So she did. Standing in his 31st floor kitchen in Gangnam at midnight, while Seoul glittered below them like spilled electricity, Zara Mensah told Yeon Tae-sang how her mother made Sunday stew, and he listened with his whole body, quiet and present. And by the end of it the distance between them had changed. Not the physical distance, which was appropriate and maintained, but something subtler. Something that doesn't have a word in either Korean or Twi, but both languages know the shape of. She looked up at him. He was already looking at her. "Tae-sang," she said. "I know," he said, very quietly. The city hummed 31 floors below. He was close enough that she could see the specific way he was holding himself. Careful, deliberate, like a man who was choosing every millimeter. She did not step back. He reached out and touched the side of her face. One hand, the backs of his fingers along her cheekbone, the softest thing she had ever felt from a man who could stop 3 people with one word. She closed her eyes. His thumb moved once across her cheekbone like punctuation. Then his hand dropped and he stepped back. Not because he wanted to, she could see that with devastating clarity, but because he was asking, still, without language, still giving her the choice. "Stay," she said, "just not far." He pulled out the chair at the kitchen island, sat down, and stayed. The following morning she woke to the smell of doenjang jjigae and the disorienting conviction that her chest was doing something that couldn't be undone. He was in the kitchen. He'd taken off his jacket from the night before. His sleeves were rolled. He looked, and she logged this against her will, like someone who had been designed specifically to destroy her good judgment. "You cook," she said, standing in the kitchen doorway. "Adequately," he said. "You run an empire and you're standing in a kitchen at 7 in the morning making fermented soybean paste soup. The empire runs itself when necessary." He set a bowl on the island. "Seat," she sat. They ate in comfortable silence, which was its own kind of intimacy. The kind that doesn't need to be decorated. Her phone had 10 missed calls. The commission. Her supervisor. And one from a private number that, when she listened to the voicemail, was a man telling her in precise and unhurried Korean that she should withdraw her documentation and leave Seoul within the week. She set the phone down. "The partners are escalating." Tae-sang looked at the phone. His expression had shifted back to the version of him that inhabited the other part of his world. Not cold, exactly. Concentrated. "Show me the voicemail." She played it. He listened once. He picked up his own phone, made a call and murmured Korean she didn't fully catch, and put it down. "It's handled." Tae-sang. She leaned forward. "How is it handled? What does handled mean for you?" He met her eyes. "It means no one threatens you again. It means they understand the cost." He paused. I don't do things that I would need to lie to you about. The men from last night are being held by people who have the authority to hold them. Kwon's partners will be brought before an investigation board by the end of the week. Legal channels. I have enough documentation to bury them through process alone. She studied him. And the rumors, the ones Soo-yeon mentioned. He held her gaze. My father built this company with methods that required certain relationships. I inherited them. I've been restructuring those relationships for 4 years. I am not innocent of my family's history. He said it plainly. But I am not my father. It was more than most men gave. It was the honest version of the complicated truth. Okay, she said. He looked at her for a moment like he hadn't expected it to be that simple. Okay? I'm not a court, she said. I'm a person. Okay. Something in his face shifted, fractional, deep, like a tectonic adjustment. He looked at his coffee. She looked at hers. I want to meet your mother, he said quietly. Someday, when you go home. The want in those words, steady and genuine and terrifying, traveled all the way down Zara's spine. She'll feed you too much stew, she said. I have high pepper tolerance, he said. She laughed, the real one, the one that came from her belly, and his face opened into the first real smile she'd seen from him, full and unguarded and directed entirely at her, and it was so much more devastating than she'd anticipated that she looked away immediately, cheeks warm, completely undone. The week that followed was one she would replay in precise detail for years. He was careful, she was careful, but Seoul conspired against distance in small, relentless ways. He came to the commission building twice on legitimate business, and both times her pulse was embarrassingly obvious to her. She brought him a book she'd found, something she thought he'd enjoy based on a passing comment he'd made, and the look on his face when he received it made Soo-yeon, watching from across the office, quietly mouth. You are so in trouble. She was. She knew. The gala for the commission's year-end was the 15th of December. Zara wore ivory, a form-fitting Ghanaian-designed gown that her friend had shipped from Accra when Zara mentioned having an event. It had gold thread at the collar and hem, and it moved when she walked in a way that suggested intention. T-sang saw her across the ballroom and went completely still. He was with 3 board members and a government official. They were mid-sentence. He stopped tracking the sentence. Sung-yi beside him made a small sound that was professionally almost nothing. T-sang recollected himself after approximately 4 seconds, which, for him, was an eternity of visible reaction, and returned to the conversation. But he found her again within the hour, with the absolute reliability of gravity. You look, he began. Don't, she said. I was going to say extraordinary. I know. Don't. He stood beside her. Why? Because if you say it, then I have to do something about how you make me feel, and I'm not ready to do that yet. A beat of silence. He looked at the room, not at her, deliberately, giving her the privacy of not being watched while she was this honest. All right, he said, when you're ready. She looked at his profile, the patience in it, the restraint that was its own kind of tenderness. Thank you, she said, very softly. He nodded once, like receiving something that mattered. The man who flirted with her at the gala was a European trade consultant named Marcus, tall, effortlessly charming, the variety of man who had learned to direct all his charm at whatever woman seemed least interested. He was funny. Zara appreciated funny. She laughed twice and he moved closer. Across the room, 3 things happened on T-sang's face in rapid succession. The stillness, the jaw, and something that Sung-yi recognized and very quietly moved away from. He didn't intervene immediately. He was not, he told himself, that man. He lasted 11 minutes. He crossed the room at a pace that was steady and deliberate and communicated, to everyone watching who understood the language of men like him, that he had decided something. He arrived beside Zara and Marcus and placed his hand very lightly, barely contact, at the small of Zara's back. She went absolutely still under his hand. Marcus looked at T-sang. T-sang looked at Marcus with the specific, calibrated expression of a man who was being quite pleasant and quite clear simultaneously. T-sang, Zara said. You're needed at the commissioner's table, he said to her. Am I? Yes, he said. Marcus said his goodbyes with the alacrity of a man who had abruptly understood the architecture of the evening. Zara let T-sang steer her 2 steps before she turned and looked at him. Was I actually needed? No. No apology in it. Just the truth. You were jealous, she said. He didn't deny it. He held her gaze and said quietly, yes. The honesty of it, again, the simple, unvarnished honesty, hit her somewhere deeper than the possessiveness itself. She looked at him for a moment. Good, she said, and walked to the commissioner's table. He watched her sit down. From across the room, even at that distance, she thought she could feel him exhale. The attack came 3 days before Christmas. Not dramatic, not cinematic the way violence sometimes pretends to be. It was a car that ran a light and hit the vehicle she was in, and it was very obviously not an accident. Sung-yi, who had been following her in the car behind, was out of his vehicle before the other car had stopped, and the driver ran, which innocent drivers do not do. Zara had a bruised shoulder and a cut on her temple from the window glass. She refused the ambulance. She was sitting on the pavement in the December cold, coat dusty, hair loose, pressing a cloth to her head when Tae-sang arrived. He'd been 11 minutes away when Sung-yi called. He knelt in front of her on the pavement. Yeon Tae-sang, in a 300,000 suit, kneeling on a Sayako street to look at her face at eye level, and examined the cut with hands that were not entirely steady. She had never seen his hands not steady. "I'm fine," she said. "You have glass in your hair. I've had worse." Zara, her name and his voice that way, low and tight and stripped of its usual control. "Stop." She stopped. He picked glass from her braids with the focused care of a man temporarily set aside everything else he was in order to be only this. Here, careful, with her. She let him. The cold was on the pavement, in the air. His hands were warm. "I need to end this," he said. Not to her exactly. More to himself. All of it. Kwon's network, the people above them. I have been patient and I need to stop being patient. What does that mean? He looked at her. It means I'm going to use every resource I have, legal, financial, and relational, to bury every person who has touched your life in the last month, permanently. Tae-sang, I know your objections. I know you don't want rescue. I know you can handle things. His eyes were steady on hers. I'm not doing it for the sake of rescue. I'm doing it because they put glass in your hair and I will not forgive that. The clarity of it. The simple, unreasonable, absolute clarity. Her voice was not entirely steady when she said, "Okay," he helped her up. His hands stayed linked with hers for 3 full seconds longer than necessary. Neither of them mentioned it. He dismantled Kwon's network in 5 days. It was quiet. It was thorough. By the 23rd of December, 3 senior officials were under formal investigation. A shell company used to funnel altered trade data had been reported to financial authorities. And every person who had materially threatened Zara Mensah had a new and significant relationship with consequences. She didn't ask for details. He didn't withhold the broad shape of it. On the 24th, he arrived at her apartment at 7 in the evening with groceries. She opened the door and looked at the bags. "Christmas Eve," he said simply. She stepped back and let him in. They cooked together. Real cooking. Her showing him the architecture of the Sunday stew, him absorbing it with the total attention he applied to everything, occasionally asking precise questions that made her realize he was actually learning, not performing interest. The kitchen filled with steam and the smell of things from home and something that had no country of origin but felt, nonetheless, like the most right thing Zara had been inside in a long time. At some point, the music from her phone became quiet jazz, though she didn't remember selecting it. At some point, the cooking became standing close together over the same pot. At some point, the conversation had dropped from words to silence that was better than words. She turned to say something and found him already looking at her. Close, the city lights coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him like a borrowed backdrop. "Zara," he said. "I know," she said. He lifted his hand to the side of her face, the same gesture, careful, chosen, and this time she turned into it. This time she let the distance become nothing. He kissed her the way she thought he probably did most things, with complete intention and no performance. Soft first, then certain. Her hands found his lapels. His other arm came around her carefully, like something he was trying not to break. The city was very bright and very far away. Later, much later, she woke before him. The apartment was still and gray with early morning. He was beside her, asleep in a way he probably never allowed in daylight. Face open, the severity gone from it. Just a person who had been carrying extraordinary weight for a long time and had briefly set it down. She looked at him. She felt the specific terror of having let someone in far enough to matter. By the time he stirred, she was dressed and her bag was at the door. He sat up, looked at her. His face registered it immediately. The coat, the bag, the way she was standing. "Zara, I have an early flight consideration," she said. "My mother..." "Stop." He was standing. He moved toward her and she moved back and something crossed his face that was the deepest thing she'd seen there. "What are you doing?" "I think," her voice caught. She steadied it. "I think I need to go back to Accra for a while. Recalibrate." "Recalibrate." He repeated it. "Quiet. Is that what this is?" "What we are is," she pressed her palms together. "You live in this world, T-Sang, and I'm passing through it, and I got confused about which one is real." "You're not confused," he said. "You're afraid." She was afraid. He was not wrong, and she hated that he wasn't wrong. "I am afraid," she admitted. "You are a lot. Everything you are, everything your world is. You are so much, and I don't know how to be inside of that without losing the parts of myself I've spent my whole life building." He stood very still for a moment. Then he said, "I would not take those parts. I would never take those parts." "You don't know that. I know that I have been paying attention to you since the night you crouched in my lobby to charge your phone and spoke to me like I was any other person in the world." His voice was low, controlled, and under the control, something enormous. "I know that every version of myself that exists, every one of them, wants to deserve you, and I know that you are the first thing in 11 years that I have wanted for reasons that have nothing to do with strategy or protection or legacy." He took a breath. "I know that." Zara's eyes were burning. She was not generally a woman who cried. "T-Sang, go to Accra," he said. "Go see your mother. Eat the stew." He was still not moving toward her, still giving her the space. "I'll be here." She looked at him across the room. The city was pale and early behind him. He looked like a man who had handed everything over and was simply waiting to find out if it was received. She picked up her bag, and she left. He stood in the quiet apartment and let her. She was in Accra for 6 weeks. Abina Mensa fed her too much and asked too few questions and held her daughter's hand every evening while the Accra night came in warm and full of sound. And Zara thought about T-Sang with the relentless frequency of a woman trying very hard not to think about someone. He sent one message, 3 days after she left. "The stew was good. I made it wrong. Tell me what I missed." She sent back the 3 corrections. He replied with, "Thank you. Nothing more." He had said he would be there. He was there in the way of a man who had learned that presence doesn't require noise. Kofi's university fees were paid. She found out from her brother, who received a transfer from a Korean corporate scholarship program she had never heard of and could not trace, and who was so excited he barely noticed she'd gone still when he told her. She thought about calling T-Sang. She thought about it for 4 days. She called. "The scholarship," she said. "What scholarship?" he said. T-Sang. A pause. "He's going to be a good engineer," he said. "The program is legitimate. He earned the criteria." "You made the criteria." "I expanded existing criteria." She sat on the step of her mother's house with the Accra evening happening around her and felt the last resistance dissolve. Not dramatically. More like the way a knot loosens when you finally stop pulling against it. "I'm coming back," she said. 3 seconds of silence. Then, very quietly, "I know." She came back on a Thursday in late February. He was at the airport. She stopped when she saw him. He was standing at arrivals, and he looked exactly like himself. The suit, the stillness, the presence that rearranged the air around it. He was holding nothing. There was no driver with a sign. Just him, standing where she would see him, having decided to be there. She walked toward him. He walked toward her. They met in the middle of the arrivals hall with Seoul winter pressing against the glass walls. "You came to the airport," she said. "Yes," he said. "You've never been to the airport." "I've never had a reason to." She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back with everything visible on his face. All of it, unhidden, offered. She stepped forward and put her arms around him. He held her. Immediately, completely, with the particular quality of a man holding something he'd been afraid would never come back. His face was in her hair. "I made the stew again," he said, "against her braids. I still got it wrong." She laughed, pressed into his shoulder. He tightened his arms. Behind them, Seoul continued in its loud and indifferent way. Flights departed and arrived. People moved around them with suitcases and purposes. They stayed still in the middle of all of it, in the middle of everything, holding on. Seoul in late February was the city holding its breath before spring arrived to convince it things could be different. Zara felt it every morning, that particular suspension, the air carrying the promise of a thaw it hadn't yet committed to. She felt it in herself too. She moved back into the Gangnam apartment because he asked, simply, And because the part of her that had spent 6 weeks in Accra, pretending she wasn't counting the days, had run out of arguments against the thing she actually wanted. He did not make it a negotiation. He said, "Come back to the apartment. You'll be safer and I'll sleep better." The honesty of that second reason was the reason she agreed. They were careful with each other in a new way now. Careful the way you are with something real, something that can be damaged. He came by in the evenings when his schedule released him, and they cooked or argued about books or sat on the floor of the living room with her laptop between them while she walked him through Twi phrases, and he attempted pronunciation with the focused seriousness of a man submitting to an exam. He was terrible at the tones. She laughed until her sides hurt. He tried again. She started leaving things at the apartment. A book, her second phone charger, a jar of dawa dawa paste on the third shelf, small claims. He never mentioned them. She noticed he reorganized the shelf to give the jar more room. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after her return. Soo-yeon found her in the commission's break room with a particular expression of someone carrying information they wish they didn't have. She set her phone on the table face up. It was a photograph from a society column. T sang at some event 6 months ago before Zara had come to Seoul, standing beside a woman. Elegant, precise, the kind of Korean beauty that looked like it had been curated over generations. The caption named her, Oh Ki-rin, heiress to the O shipping group, long-rumored partner of Yeon T-sang. Long-rumored, Zara said. It gets less comfortable, Soo-yeon said. She took the phone back, scrolled. Another article, more recent, 2 weeks ago, while Zara was still in Accra. A dinner at a private club. Oh Ki-rin. And T-sang's mother, Madame Yeon, seated between them with the specific satisfaction of a woman executing a plan. Zara looked at the photo for a long time. Is it old? She asked. The dinner is new, Soo-yeon said quietly. She didn't call him. She sat with it. The stone back in her pocket, heavier now, a different shape. She examined what she knew and what she didn't. She examined the version of herself that immediately defaulted to the assumption of betrayal and recognized it as her mother's fear wearing her face. Then she examined the version of herself that ignored photographs and called it trust and recognized that as something else entirely. By evening, she had arrived at the only reasonable position. She would ask. He came at 7. He had takeout from a Jjangmyeon place in Mapo he'd found because she'd mentioned it once in passing. He set it on the island, and then he looked at her face and set his keys down carefully. What happened? He said. She showed him the photographs. He looked at them for several seconds. He looked at the one from 2 weeks ago. His mother, Ki-rin, the staged architecture of that table, and something that was not quite anger and not quite resignation moved through his expression. Sit down, he said. She sat. He sat across from her. He did not reach for her hand or close the distance. He gave her the space to receive what he was about to say without it being softened by proximity. My mother has been trying to arrange a marriage with the O family for 3 years, he said. Oh Ki-rin and I have met at approximately 8 events in that time. We are not together. We have never been together. She is aware of this. My mother is less willing to accept it. He looked at Zara steadily. The dinner 2 weeks ago was my mother's attempt, while you were in Accra, to present the arrangement as more progressed than it is. I did not attend that dinner. The photograph is from a separate event. Zara looked at him. Your mother arranged a dinner while I was gone. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I was handling it. T sang. She leaned forward. I need to be told things, not protected from them. Told, those are different. He held her gaze. And this was the thing about him that kept undoing her. He didn't justify it or reframe it. He said, you're right. I'm sorry. Clean. No qualifier. Just the acknowledgement. She breathed out. Is your mother going to be a problem? My mother, he said carefully, loves me in the way that people who have confused love with control love someone. She will require time and clarity. He paused. She will not be a problem for you, I'll make certain. I don't need you to fight her on my behalf. I'm not doing it on your behalf, he said. I'm doing it because my life is mine and what I choose in it is mine. You happen to be what I've chosen. The directness of that. You happen to be what I've chosen. Like it was simple. Like it had been decided and he'd simply been waiting to say it out loud. Zara looked at the jjangmyeon cooling in its containers between them. You got the right noodles, she said finally. I asked the right questions, he said. She reached across the island and opened a container. He opened the other. They ate. Kirin arrived in Zara's life on a Wednesday morning like weather nobody had forecast. She was waiting outside the commission building, unmistakable, precise, dressed in cream with her hair perfect, and her expression carrying the controlled civility of a woman who had learned to weaponize grace. She fell into step beside Zara with the ease of someone who had planned this. "You're Zara Mensah," she said in flawless English. "Yes," Zara said. "I'm Kirin. I know." They walked a few steps in silence. Kirin was not hostile, that was the thing. She was almost frank, which was more unsettling. "I want you to understand something," Kirin said. "I have no interest in Yon Tisang. I have not had that interest for 2 years, since I understood his character clearly enough to know that he would be loyal to one person and impossible for anyone else." She paused. "His mother, however, has built a significant portion of a business negotiation on the assumption of our union. The Oyon shipping corridor deal is worth 400 billion won. It is tied, in her mind, to a marriage." Zara stopped walking. She turned to look at Kirin directly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Madame Yon has decided you are the obstacle," Kirin said, "and she has resources and relationships and a particular talent for making obstacles disappear quietly." She met Zara's eyes. "I thought you should know the shape of what's coming." "A beat." "Why?" Zara asked again. Something moved in Kirin's expression. Not warmth exactly, but something adjacent to it. Respect, perhaps. "Because you're the first person he's looked at in 11 years like that," she said. "And I'd rather lose a shipping deal than be the reason that disappears." She walked back the way she came. Zara stood on the pavement and reassembled everything. Madame Yon moved quickly. Within the week, Zara's commission contract was flagged for a review that her supervisor could not fully explain. An anonymous complaint about interpreter conduct, no specifics, the bureaucratic version of a thrown stone with no fingerprints. The apartment building management received a noise complaint that had no basis and triggered an inspection. A story appeared in a minor society column. Foreign national in close relationship with Yon Group Air, sources question professional boundaries. None of it was large. All of it was cumulative. It was the work of someone who understood that you didn't need a sword when you had 1,000 needles and enough patience. Zara documented everything, she told Tisang. She watched his face go through several things very quickly before settling into something very still and very decided. "I need to speak with my mother," he said. "Tisang, this ends tonight." She had not seen this version of him directed at someone he loved. She understood, watching it form on his face, why the people in his professional world maintained their distance so carefully. This was not anger. It was something colder and more permanent than anger. It was resolution. He left. She sat in the apartment with Su Yon, who had come over under the auspices of reviewing documents and was actually just making sure Zara had a person nearby, and they ate delivery and Su Yon asked no direct questions and Zara offered no direct answers, and this was, in its own way, one of the kindest evenings she'd had in Seoul. Whatever passed between Tisang and Madame Yon that night, he didn't report in detail. What Zara observed was this. The complaint at the commission was retracted within 48 hours. The column story was corrected and attributed to an unnamed source whose credibility was publicly questioned. The Oyon corridor deal was restructured through a subsidiary arrangement that removed the marriage premise entirely. She learned this from Kirin, who sent her a single text that read, "Deal is separate. You can relax." And then, 10 days later, Madame Yon called Zara directly. Zara stared at her phone for 4 seconds, then answered. The conversation was 12 minutes long. Madame Yon's English was formal and precise and carried the weight of a woman who did not apologize as a rule, but was navigating the architecture of an exception. She said, "My son has made his position clear. I would prefer to know the woman it concerns." She said, "You speak Korean. I'd prefer to continue in Korean, if that's acceptable." She said near the end, with the compressed difficulty of someone handing something over, "He has not been happy. In a long time, I needed to see it to believe it." Zara said, "I understand that. I also need you to understand that I will not be managed." A silence. Then, with something that might have been the first unguarded thing in the conversation, "No. I can see that." It was not warmth, it was not resolved, but it was a line drawn between them that both parties understood and that could, eventually, become something other than a front. Zara told Tisang that evening. He looked at her with an expression of quiet, complete amazement. "She called you," he said. "She called me. My mother does not call people." "She called me," Zara said again. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The morning Zara understood something had shifted in her body, she was in the apartment kitchen before dawn, drinking water because nothing else was settling, and performing the quiet mathematics of someone who has been keeping careful track and has suddenly arrived at a number that doesn't match. She sat very still for a long time. Then she drove herself, not in his car, in her own rented car, alone, to a clinic in a neighborhood where no one would recognize either of their names. She sat in the waiting room. She sat in the examination room. She held the results in her hands and looked at them with the specific stillness of someone whose entire axis has rotated. Not one, not two, three. The doctor, a calm and thorough woman in her 50s, said words like early stage, strong readings, rare but not uncommon in women with a specific genetic predisposition, and you'll need specialist monitoring from week 8. Zara heard them from a distance, nodded appropriately, and walked to her car. She sat in the parking structure for 20 minutes. 3 heartbeats. She drove home. She didn't tell him that day, or the next. She moved through the days with the altered quality of someone carrying a glass filled to the absolute rim. Present, functional, terrified of movement. She was not afraid of the pregnancy. She was not afraid of the children. She was afraid of the moment she said the words out loud and watched his face. Because if his face gave her anything other than what she needed, she would not survive it with her interior architecture intact. She knew this about herself. She'd learned it from watching her mother love a man who'd left before Kofi was born, love freely given to someone who was not prepared to receive it, and the particular permanent damage that left in a woman who deserved none of it. T-Sang noticed. Of course he noticed. On the 4th day, he came in the evening and sat beside her on the couch and didn't turn on the television or open his phone and simply waited, with that patience that was its own kind of language, until she was ready. She turned to look at him. Something happened, he said. Something happened, she confirmed. She told him. She watched his face. She watched it receive each word with the careful focus of a man translating something critical. She watched the stillness. And she felt this in her own chest before she fully processed it on his face. She watched him break open. Not in a visible, dramatic way. Nothing so neat. It was subtler. The way his breath changed, the way his eyes went bright and almost panicked, and then, past the panic, something enormous and undefended. He looked at her like she had said something that reorganized everything he'd ever believed about what his life was allowed to contain. 3, he said. 3, she said. His hand moved to her face. The gesture, always the same gesture, the backs of his fingers against her cheekbone, and then he was holding her face in both hands and looking at her like she was the most staggering thing he had ever been asked to comprehend. Zara. His voice was stripped of everything except the core of him. I know it's... Don't say complicated. He pressed his forehead to hers. Don't qualify it. She closed her eyes. I'm scared, she said very quietly. I know. His thumbs moved. So am I. It's all right. You're scared? I've been terrified since the night you crouched in my lobby, he said, against her hair. Terrified that you'd leave. That you wouldn't come back from Accra. That I'd say something wrong. That I wouldn't be enough. He pulled back far enough to look at her. Being scared and being certain aren't mutually exclusive. I'm certain. She looked at him. Of what? Of you, he said. Of this. Of whatever form this takes. The last glass wall she'd been standing behind, the one she'd built from her mother's experience and her own fear and the accumulated evidence that love at this intensity produced casualties, cracked clean through. She leaned forward and he met her. The danger she had believed was resolved came back without warning in the 3rd week of March, the way unfinished things always do. She had a name now, the man who had organized the original ambush in Sayako Gu. Not Kwon, who was small. Above Kwon. A name in the shipping industry, a man whose interests in the trade data manipulation Zara had surfaced ran deeper and older than anyone had initially mapped, and whose exposure in the audit triggered by T-Sang's intervention had cost him enough that he'd decided the source of the problem needed to be removed more permanently than a car accident. His name was Director I.M. Hyun Soo. He was 62, respectable-looking, and had been operating in Seoul's financial infrastructure for 30 years in a way that made him feel untouchable. He was, T-Sang would later note with a particular quality of understatement, mistaken about that. The night it escalated, Zara was at the commission for a late documentation session, 9 weeks into the pregnancy, tired in the deep cellular way of someone whose body has redirected its resources. Soo-yeon was with her, Sung Yi was in the building lobby. T-Sang had assigned him, quietly since the Sayoko incident, which Zara had accepted without protest. The two men who arrived at her floor were not commission employees. The building security, compromised in a way that would later reveal a 3-month payment trail, let them up. Sung Yi was upstairs and at the door of her office in 90 seconds. He'd been monitoring the lobby feed, but the initial confrontation happened without him. One man. Zara's office. A direct, unambiguous instruction to hand over the original documentation that had triggered the audit and withdraw her witness statement from the formal investigation, delivered in the tone of someone accustomed to compliance. Zara Mensah looked at him across her desk and said, in precise Korean, "No." She said it with the particular calm of a woman who had been threatened before, who was frankly exhausted by the pattern of it, and who had decided somewhere around week 7 of her pregnancy that she was going to be the kind of mother whose children watched her stand up straight. Sung Yi arrived. The men left. Soo Yeon, who had been in the neighboring office and heard everything through the wall, came in shaking. Zara was not shaking. She called T-Sang. He answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been watching his phone. "Sung Yi called," he said. "I know." She sat down. "I'm fine. I'm aware." A pause, controlled. "I'm 20 minutes away." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He arrived in 17 minutes. He walked into her office and crossed directly to her and stood in front of her with that scanning look. Face, arms, hands. That she now recognized as his version of checking that the world was still intact. "Im Hyun-soo," she said. "Yes. How long have you known?" "I've suspected since January. I've had confirmation since last week." His jaw was tight. "I was building a complete legal case before moving. I should have moved faster." "You keep saying that." "It keeps being true." She stood up. "So move now, move completely. I want this finished," T-Sang, "not managed, finished. For me and for whatever comes after us." She put her hand briefly, deliberately, on the just visible curve below her coat. His eyes went there. "Okay," he said. Low and absolute. "Okay," she said. What Yeon T-Sang did in the next 6 days was the kind of thing that didn't become public in its mechanics, only in its results. Im Hyun-soo's financial architecture was submitted to 3 separate investigative bodies simultaneously: the Korea Financial Intelligence Unit, the Fair Trade Commission, and a prosecutor's office whose lead investigator had been trying to reach IM for 2 years and had simply never had enough. The documentation was complete, indexed, and accompanied by testimony from 4 individuals who had previously been too afraid to speak and were now, with certain assurances in place, willing. On a Thursday morning, Im Hyun-soo was taken into custody at his office in Uido. Zara was at breakfast when Sung Yi texted her. She showed T-Sang. He looked at the message and said nothing for a moment. "It's done?" she said. "It's done." She sat with that. The shape of it, the finality, the months of accumulated threat finally having a terminus. She exhaled something she'd been holding since November. "Thank you," she said. "You started it," he said. "The first day you brought Kwon's records to your supervisor and refused to let it go when he dismissed you. You started it. I finished it. The credit goes to both of us." She looked at him. "That's a very fair way to describe it." "I've been practicing being fair," he said. "I had a teacher." She threw a napkin at him. He caught it. His eyes were warm. The public moment happened without planning, which was perhaps why it was the most honest version of it. It was a joint commission event in April, a formal reception at the Grand Hyatt, attended by government officials, trade delegates, and representatives from Seoul's major corporate families. T-Sang was there for the Yeon Group. Zara was there as lead interpreter for the Ghanaian delegation. She was at the podium, translating a speech, when she saw him in the audience, and the precise moment he saw her, across the room, with the full attendance of both their professional worlds between them and 12 weeks of pregnancy quietly present beneath her structured gown. She finished the translation. She returned to her seat. The event moved through its formal architecture. And then a journalist, a woman Zara recognized from the Society column that had previously run the story about her, apparently emboldened by the Im Hyun-soo coverage that had drawn connections to the Yeon Group's investigation role, approached during the reception and said, "Recorder out," the particular question designed to destabilize. "Ms. Mensah, can you comment on your personal relationship with Yeon T-Sang and whether it influenced the trade investigation outcome?" The room didn't quite stop, but it tilted. T-Sang was 12 feet away. She felt him become very still. She could handle it. She would handle it. She opened her mouth to deliver the professional, measured, precise response she had prepared herself for in the event of exactly this question, and then T-Sang was beside her. He did not move quickly. He crossed the room at his normal pace, which was the pace of a man who did not adjust his pace for circumstances, and stood next to her with the complete intention of being exactly where he was. He looked at the journalist. "She is my partner," he said clearly, in the precise tone of a man answering a question that is not particularly complicated. "Our personal relationship has no bearing on the investigation, which was conducted independently through proper legal channels, the documentation of which is public record." He paused. "If you have questions about the investigation, speak to the prosecutor's office. If you have questions about my partner, you can speak to her directly." The recorder was still running. The journalist was recalibrating. "Your partner," the journalist said. Meaning exactly what I said." He turned and looked at Zara with everything on his face, unhidden, unperformed, in front of the room. "Unless the word isn't sufficient, in which case I can clarify." Zara looked back at him. The room was quite attentive. Soo-yeon, visible over his shoulder, had both hands pressed over her mouth. "It's sufficient," Zara said. "Good." He held her gaze for one more second. Then to the room at large, with a composure so absolute it functioned as its own statement. "If you'll excuse us." They walked away together. The room resumed its noise, louder now, with the particular energy of people who had just witnessed something they would describe to others for months. In the corridor outside the ballroom, away from the crowd, Zara stopped and turned to look at him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. You just announced us to every person who matters in this city. Yes. Your PR team is going to. I'll handle my PR team." She looked at him steadily. "T-Sang, why?" He looked back at her. And then, with the quality of a man who has been building to something for 5 months and has simply run out of reasons to delay it. "Because I'm done being careful about the wrong things." He reached into his jacket. She watched him, confused, and then not confused, not at all, as he produced a ring that was not ostentatious and not performative, and was exactly the kind of thing she would have chosen herself. A deep, warm gold with a single oval stone the color of dark water at night. Simple, precisely made, chosen. The corridor was empty. Seoul continued loudly outside the building. Inside, just the two of them, and the quiet and the weight of 5 months arriving at its natural conclusion. He didn't kneel. He stood in front of her and held the ring between them in the direct, honest way he did everything. "You walked into my building to charge your phone," he said. "And then you left, and I spent the next week finding excuses to be in places where I might see you again, which is not something I've ever done for anything in my life." He paused. "You are the most inconvenient, most important, most genuine thing that has ever happened to me. You've restructured everything I thought I understood about what I wanted." His eyes held hers. "I want the Sunday stew and the wrong tones and the arguments about books and the 3 people we're building. I want the version of my life that contains you specifically." He exhaled. "Zara Mensa, please marry me." She looked at him for a long moment. 5 months of Seoul, a lobby and a wrong turn and an outlet behind a pillar. Coffee that appeared from nowhere. Groceries from home on the 31st floor, glass picked carefully from her braids. An airport arrival with no driver and no sign. 11 minutes of driving from wherever he was in the world to wherever she needed him. 3 heartbeats. "Yes," she said. He put the ring on her finger. His hands were steady. She noted this specifically. Steady, completely steady, which told her that unlike almost everything else in his life, this was the one thing he had never been afraid of. He held her hand for a moment after. Then he looked at her face. "You're not crying," he said. "I told you, I don't cry. Your eyes are doing something. My eyes are fine." "Zara, I'm not crying," T-Sang. He pulled her in. She pressed her face into his shoulder. Neither of them mentioned the specific dampness that may or may not have occurred. They were married on a Saturday in June in a ceremony that held both worlds. The venue was a garden space in Bakshan, private, not large, because Zara had said clearly that she wanted people she loved in a room she could see all of at once, and he had agreed without hesitation, redirecting the Yeon Group's event planners from the grand hall option they'd proposed towards something that felt human. Kent cloth and Korean silk in the arrangements. An aunt from Accra sang. His best university friend, a man named Jeon Taek-min, who had served as T-Sang's closest confidant since age 19, stood at his side and cried with such transparent lack of self-consciousness that it made half the room do the same. Abina Mensa flew in from Accra. She sat in the front row in a dress the color of the Accra evening, and when Zara walked in, she covered her face with both hands briefly and then recovered herself and sat straight, which was the most her mother she had ever looked. Tseng watched Zara walk toward him the way he'd watched her that night at the gala in Ivory. Completely still, like someone had pressed pause on everything inside him, all the machinery stilled to accommodate the fact of her. She reached him. He looked at her face. "Still not crying," she said quietly, "just for him." "Of course not," he said, and his voice did something on the last word that contradicted it entirely. They laughed, quiet, just between them, in the moment before the ceremony began. Madame Yon sat at the family table with the careful composure of a woman adjusting to a version of the world she hadn't authored. She was not warm. She was present. By the end of the evening, she had spoken with Abina Mensa for 40 minutes, initially through an interpreter, then, to everyone's quiet amazement, in slow, basic English that she had apparently been practicing, because she was a woman who prepared for things. No one knew when they'd arrived at a common language. Only that they had. The three of them arrived in October. The boys, and they were 3 boys, which Tseng had absorbed with the expression of a man doing rapid psychological preparation, were born on an early Sunday morning, and Zara, who had said she was not a woman who cried on the second one because the exhaustion and the wonder combined into something that simply exceeded the policy. Tseng was there for every second. He held each of them with the focus of a man receiving something that required his utmost precision and care. He did not know what to do with his face. It moved through things she had never seen on it, soft and open and completely uncalculated. And she loved him for it with a depth she hadn't known she was still capable of adding to. They named them in 3 languages. The Korean names he'd spent months selecting with the gravity of a legislative process, the Ghanaian day names Abina had proposed, and the English middle names they'd landed on together on a Tuesday night over cold ramen, arguing cheerfully, neither one willing to fully concede. 6 months later, on a Sunday, Zara made the stew. Too much pepper, deliberately, the way her mother made it, because she had decided this was what they were doing in this household. Tseng stood at the stove beside her, sleeves rolled, one of the boys on his left arm because Seo Nana had decided at 4 months that any situation in which he was not being held was incorrect and required protest. The other 2 were asleep in the nursery. Seoul was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, big and noisy and indifferent in the way great cities are. "Too much pepper," he said, tasting. "Correct amount," she said. "My tongue disagrees." "Your tongue is wrong." Nana made a sound. Tseng shifted him absently, stirred the stew, and looked at Zara with the expression she had finally, after a year of study, fully mapped. The one that meant this is everything, and I know it, and I'm not going to perform being casual about it. She felt it in her chest, the way she always did. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "You're doing the thing." "I don't have a thing." "You absolutely have a thing." He looked at her steadily. "I was thinking," he said, "that you charged your phone in my lobby with 2% battery and changed every single thing." He paused. "And I'm grateful for the dead phone." She looked at him across the steam from the pot. Nana was pulling at Tseng's collar with small determined fingers. The stew was too peppery and exactly right. The apartment was full of the sounds of the life they had built from a wrong turn in a marble lobby and an orange wool coat. "I should have taken the wrong turn sooner," she said. "You took it at exactly the right time," he said. She turned back to the stew. He stayed beside her. Outside, Seoul moved through Sunday morning in its uninterrupted roar. Inside the 31st floor, 3 boys who had 3 names each, and the whole world arranged in their favor slept, or made their opinions known, and their parents stood over a pot of too peppery Sunday stew and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say that the morning wasn't already saying for them. This story is dedicated to every woman who was discarded by someone who didn't know what they had, and to every love that was patient enough to arrive at exactly the right time. Afro-Korean Justice Stories. Stay subscribed. The next one is already waiting.